Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Grand Page. I'm your most humble and obedient servant, Page Ghost. I've been really looking forward to getting to this review that I'll be doing today. It's been on the back burner for a while. I read this a good while back and wanted to make sure to give it enough time to mull over in my head, really think about the story that I read, how it fits in with previous iterations, how it fits in with sort of my interpretations of the characters, all that stuff. But, and also got real busy here and there too. Admittedly, reviewing shows, movies, even video games in some instances, those are a lot easier and much faster to review than necessarily something that you read. But with all that being said, I'm very excited to get into my review of Absolute Superman. I did previously review Absolute Batman, and it was a huge recommend from me personally. I got into a lot of discussion around the different versions of Batman and how, because there are so many different versions now, everyone kind of approaches the character in a lot of different ways despite all of them being Batman. It's a similar situation with Absolute Superman and with Absolute Wonder Woman. That'll be my next video after this one. But I don't have nearly as much history with Superman, and especially not as much with Wonder Woman, so it's not going to be as interpretation heavy, so to speak. With all that out of the way, I do think I discussed a little bit of my history with Superman when I talked about the James Gunn movie. So I'm not going to get too much into that here, but what I will say is I do have background on Superman comics, not nearly as extensive as Batman. I'm still obsessed with Batman to this day. I literally have an entire shelf right there. That entire top shelf is all Batman right there, whereas just a very small portion of one shelf is all Superman. But I do have several stories of Supermans that I really, really enjoy. The entire 3 volumes of Superman Earth 1, absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend those. J. Michael Straczynski, who also wrote Spider-Man, great writer on those. Also a Jeff Johns story called Last Son, where Superman actually adopts a kid. Very interesting story there. Very, very heartfelt too. So I have a little smattering of Superman comics experience here and there, but not nearly as extensive as Batman. My biggest experiences with Superman really lie in with the animated series and then a lot of the movies, especially Henry Cavill's portrayal of Superman. But getting into Absolute Superman here, I will be spoiling this. This has been out for a good while now, so I'm going to be talking about a lot of those differences and how they interpret into this character of Superman. And so at least these first, I believe it's 6 or 7 volumes. Yeah, so these first 6 issues compiled into one volume here really focus heavily on a combination of Superman's experiences current day on Earth versus a lot of his upbringing on Krypton. And it's actually different from the, well, of course, because it's the Absolute Run. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Absolute Run of these characters are meant to be completely different from the original interpretations. Something very, very different here is that Superman remembers his time on Krypton. He was like a kid, maybe high school, something along those lines. Basically, he was still being raised by his parents, but he was developing memories and he was getting older, stuff like that. He was going to school, a lot of those things. And there's this heavy emphasis on Krypton as being a caste system of sorts, where there's the higher level people, which I think are like the sort of the scientists or engineers and stuff like that, and then there's the lower level people, like Kal-El, like Superman, who do the farm work and things of that nature. And it focuses a lot on how he was sort of this free thinker. He didn't just accept what the scientists all said, which was very interesting. He was kind of a rebel in that aspect out on Krypton, and so were his parents too. Like they were part of this caste system where they were technically farmers, but they also they also did their own research and they also built their own things. I think the mom was like a tinkerer and stuff like that. And so, just because they were part of a certain caste system, it didn't mean that they allowed themselves to be limited to that caste system. So that was a really interesting sort of experience on Krypton for Kal-El. And then he goes to Earth, and he's kind of a vagabond. He's homeless, essentially. He goes to the places where there's trouble and helps out people there. He's in this fight with the peacemakers, right? It's this army rather than just one person. Just as an aside, I really have no history with the character of Peacemaker, especially not the John Cena story or show or anything like that. I watched James Gunn The Suicide Squad. I really wasn't super impressed by that. It had a few good moments here and there, but it wasn't anything spectacular for me personally. But yeah, so it's these 6 issues are occurring between sort of 2 different timelines. Kal-El's time on Krypton and then his time on Earth. So what I really liked about this is sort of that free thinking aspect on Krypton. That just because scientists or a certain cast of people say something is true doesn't necessarily mean that it is true. He inherently grows up with this idea of, or maybe not idea, but this mindset of just because someone says something is true doesn't mean that it is. So I thought that was very interesting because typically in how Krypton is, well, not maybe not typically anymore ever since Man of Steel, but I guess before Man of Steel, Krypton was very much viewed as a kind of utopia almost, right? But then you get Man of Steel and you get Absolute Superman, which takes things a little differently. Interprets things a little bit differently, and things aren't near as great as they might seem. So I really like that idea of him trying to be a free thinker, not just following the sort of the rules of society per se. And his parents really encouraged him in that, which is something that really all parents should encourage. Not necessarily to rebel per se, but to not just accept something just because a certain group of people say it, right? That we should think critically about things and come to our own conclusions on stuff, even if those conclusions are wrong, but to accept when they're wrong, but still to think for ourselves. So I really liked that aspect of Krypton. I don't know why I laughed there. But there's one significant change with or not a change, but how it's done. So part of the whole free thinking of Kal-El and his parents is that they know that the Krypton is doomed, and so they're trying to get everyone off planet. And essentially all the ships, at the start make it. But then something goes wrong, some sort of telemetry, sort of calibration or something. I forget exactly what, but literally Superman sees everyone, even his parents, die as he makes it off planet as it's exploding. So super traumatic event there, and then again, this is something very different from the original version. The ship has to find a habitable planet, and there's no like stasis for Superman to go in. He almost loses his mind, like in that process of the ship trying to find Earth. like he almost wants it all to end, if not outright. I don't know if they're gonna do anything with that per se specifically. It could have just been like a one-off moment for that particular issue. But I do wonder if they're gonna do some stuff with like how that affected his mind, how he really can't adjust to being on Earth. That could explain why he's being a homeless person, I guess, to an extent. But yeah, so some interesting stuff with Krypton and how he gets to Earth. He is with Ma and Pa Kent for a very brief time. But a little more realistic take, you could argue here, is that almost immediately the authorities, the government, show up on Ma and Pa Kent's door, and Superman just gets out of there to protect them. So that was a bit more of a realistic take, because I'm sure this was sort of always in the back of people's minds. You kind of accept it so that way you can have the character of Superman. But everyone kind of wonders, how did he not get discovered when he first made it here? That's never really been covered up too well. Maybe the best it's been covered up was in Smallville, where like it's an entire asteroid field, or not an asteroid field, but an entire sort of asteroid attack on Smallville, and just one of them happens to be carrying an alien. That's probably the closest to it being covered up in why Superman isn't discovered by authorities. What else? Lois Lane is part of the Peacemakers. Not really much of a reporter, so that's really, really interesting. Very different. But she sort of becomes this bridge between, or not bridge, that's probably not right, but she's very much like on the side of the authorities. Superman needs to be stopped, that sort of thing. But she comes to sort of question that position when Superman acts righteously. And so she starts to wonder if she's on the right side. That's really interesting. Oh, I haven't even touched on this. Superman's cape being the dust of Krypton, and how he can kind of manipulate it to do different things. That's really cool. It's really cool. It makes it visually interesting for the comic book experience, much like with Absolute Batman and the hooks on his cape. Makes for a very interesting visual storytelling. So overall, definitely a recommend. How this works in terms of other interpretations, how does this? I certainly haven't seen another version of Superman quite like this. Even like comparing it to Man of Steel or Earth One really quite isn't there. Those are still very much in the vein of Superman. Like people made the mistake of saying Man of Steel was dark, because of like the Dark Knight trilogy, and then Christopher Nolan being a producer on it and stuff. Man of Steel isn't dark. He's discovering who he is, and that's difficult. There's a huge difference between those experiences. Absolute Superman has pieces of sort of darker storytelling because of his experiences on Krypton, how he loses his family, how he loses Ma and Pa Kent. Those are dark experiences, not Man of Steel. Okay, so let's not get things twisted here about what constitutes dark storytelling. But this is, I would actually say that Absolute Superman is probably a bit more unique from other interpretations of Superman versus Absolute Batman. Obviously, they're both very different. That's the whole point of it. But Absolute Batman still very much. I can't quite put my finger on it, but Absolute Batman is not entirely removed from Batman, whereas Absolute Superman did actually feel removed from Superman. And that's not necessarily a knock. Like that's what they're going for, right? With this absolute line of the characters. One last little spoiler tidbit. This is something that I really like. They make Ra's al Ghul a Superman villain here rather than a Batman villain. I really, really like that because Ra's al Ghul has always been like a global threat, right? Like every plan that he's ever had has been intended to be sort of this world ending, reset the population event. So it's always made more sense to me that he would be more of a top tier villain. And the only reason he isn't is probably because of his lack of physical prowess, right? The fact that really he and Superman can't go toe to toe physically, but mentally, network wise, things like that. And they definitely expand on it here in Absolute Superman. I think this is going to work out really, really well moving forward. I don't think that I'll get the second volume nearly as quickly as I got the second volume of Absolute Batman, but what I will probably do is ask for it for like birthday or Christmas or something like that, so that way I can continue reading this series. So definitely recommend. It's going to feel very different from other interpretations of Superman, but that doesn't make it bad whatsoever. With all that being said, I am your most faithful and obedient servant, Page Ghost.